All right. Hello. Welcome. So, I have a form to pass out. This is a real simple steps to certification. I have a little guideline you can use. These are extra. We're not equal time to use again, so feel free to take one or two, use them, pass them on. End of conference season for us, so slowing down. So I'm Wendy. I've worked with MCIA on staff for a couple of years. I was an independent inspector for years before that with lots of certification agencies. Now I'm on the inside. I guess what I wonder if we can do, I'm thinking maybe just names. I'd kind of like to go around. I know I've met a number of you, but not everybody. Maybe we can just go around and do names.
Jeremy.
Yeah.
People.
Moses. Troy.
Long.
Oh, it's longer.
Long.
Oh. Okay. All right. Good.
Paku.
Wow. Okay. Sophia. Yes. Okay. Alright. Okay. I don't know that I'll remember that, but it's a good start. I'm good with writing things. That's one of my skills as an inspector. I can take good notes. So tonight, organic certification, organic system plans. It's called organic system plans, I think, because that's really what certification is based on. Okay, we'll go through a little bit of the background of where this comes from, sort of the why do we do this, and then sort of walk through how an organic system plan works. Just to add to the fun, some of you have an older one. We just updated ours this year. So there's some variations out there. I'm sorry if that's confusing, but they're very similar. I think you guys had electronic access to MFAs, which was a nice way. We thought that was a nice way to see one in action. This one hasn't been complete. This one is not perfectly complete this year because we have a new form. I think my guess would be there'll be a little bit of additions and changes, but it's a great start, especially for a farm you have some knowledge of and experience with to see what it would really look like. So let's see. With that.
Can I mention just one thing?
Yes.
So what Wendy is referring to is the organic systems plan. I do have one example of Minnesota Food Association's organic systems plan, so maybe I'll pass this around and people can look at it as we talk. But you all have this one, so everybody should have one of these handouts. Or maybe some people like Bentley and Lou have this one, which is the longer version. This is like a small version and an easier version of the full organic systems plan. So this is Minnesota Food Association's abbreviated version of this. And so this is something that we ask everybody to fill out this one. And once you get to the point that you feel you can certify on your own, like Lou and Bentley, then they switch to doing it independently with MCIA. So I just wanted to, this has almost all the same components as this, but it's easier. So.
And I skipped the folks in the back. Sure. Okay. And this is our video maker? Sorry.
No,
Behind you.
I'm small now.
Okay, thank you. I keep walking out of the way. I'll do that. Here's one more, too. I'll pass this the other way. I just brought a copy of it. I just printed them off, too, so I'll send this one this way. So, organic, right? This is a federally regulated term. This came about a long time ago now. Seems like it was way back in 1990. So this is all under a federal law. Just like any other federal law you hear about, whether it's criminal statutes or immigration or taxes, anything like that, federal law, this is the same. So we're a little different in that certifiers it's not administered. We're not federal agents. The federal agents come to us and allow us to administer these programs. They make sure that we're in compliance and that we are capable of doing certification. So where I work is a nonprofit group, just like MFA. But we are enforcing a federal law. So that's important to remember as to why we get specific into regulations and why we ask for certain things. It is all laid out in the law, and we'll go through the regulations a little bit. That said, part of our job is to make it accessible and make it help you understand, what we're asking for and why. And reading the regulations is not easy, even for native English speakers, let alone people who might be second language speakers. They're not simple. We go to classes for that, and we go to trainings all the time. But organic, so it's actually a regulated labeling term. It's kind of funny. We're under a labeling program under the USDA, which is one of those legal wrangling things that happened many years ago. That's part of why the federal government, for example, will never say that organic is better than anything else, because we're a labeling program. That said, it's all based on production practices, which do make big differences, right? Hopefully you guys are all learning about that. So the National Organic Program is in the USDA. So when we see that nice USDA symbol, that is regulated by the National Organic Program. They're who we work directly under. They have a pretty good website. It's not always easy to find everything, but there's a lot on there. There's everything from a list of everyone who's certified to the National Organic Standards, even internationally. If they're directly certified to us, is listed now on the website. So MFA is there, MONPA is there. All the different certified organic farms are listed simply by name and crops grown and a basic address. So something to know. They maintain the regulations, so when something changes, they're the first ones to post it. Not a lot has changed with crops recently, which is nice. Keep it simple for everyone. We'll keep going. So this is the quick link to what the regulations start out as. If you click on the button that says regulations. And just I don't know that we have anybody here, they do have them in Spanish, which is nice. I think that's the only language at present. So they're laid out, and you'll go through something like an organic system plan. I don't think in your grower packets, this is quite so much this way, which, I've looked at these a little while ago. Some of it is here. Some of the regulation notes, the actual citations are in there. We as certifiers have to link everything to a specific number. Just like if you get a ticket from the police officer for parking in the wrong place, they have to write you a number. We do too. That doesn't mean you get a ticket, but we do have to do it that way. That's just part of, just so you understand that the regulations are laid out by the Federal Code of Regulations. And they walk through everything from what has to be certified, exemptions and exclusions. We'll get to that. That's a common one in vegetables, where you'll hear that you can be excluded from the regulations. Record keeping, you guys even have a whole class on that, but that's prescribed in the rules, so on and so forth. And allowed and prohibited substances, that's a big one. And there's a whole class on inputs used in MFA. We'll go over that a little bit too. And feel free to stop me if you have questions or, yes, I should say.
So when you issue a citation, you get a correction order to fix the issue?
Depends. So we can do different things. Often what you'll get is, so in the process of certification, which I gave them all the way here, you start out with an application, right? Our job is to make sure it's complete. When you walk down the list to an inspection, that's usually where a citation will happen. It's like the third or fourth one on there. So we will do review. So when we get to the point after inspection, typically where you would actually get a citation is at a review/certificate stage. We can issue them in terms of sort of what are considered reminders. Like, this wasn't done well enough, but it's not something that's going to keep you from being certified. You just need to do better. Maybe you didn't have a seed receipt and you had to send that in for us to be able to verify how much seed you purchased, or that it was untreated, or non-GMO, or, often it's record keeping that we're citing people for, definitely the most common ones. The other levels, so that's sort of the nicer way, fix this before next year, or maybe we make you send it in right away. Or you can get a non-compliance. Those are not quite as fun. Those are for bigger issues typically. They come certified mail. You get so much time to respond to them. We have to send those to the federal government. Each and every, we try not to issue those. We would prefer not to, but sometimes we have to. And it varies by certifier. Some will issue them quite quickly. We're kind of slow. Which I think is okay to get the same result by talking to people and trying to figure out how to work an issue out. So yeah, those are the kind of two places you really see a citation. They're also in the OSPs. You walk down on the actual, the grower packets don't have them, but in any certifier's OSP will go section by section with citations. Organic system plan. Good question. Sorry, I should have started with this. If I'm not too far ahead. Yes, another small.
If you put a farm in a farm, you have to certify every crop you grow.
No.
Oh.
Yeah, you don't have to certify every crop you grow. You don't even have to certify every piece of land. Everything's optional. This is a voluntary. You don't have to be certified organic unless you want to sell as organic.
What I'm saying is that I'm growing 20 crops. Can I just satisfy one or? Oh.
Yes, you can. You can just certify one. The challenge is we need to have a rotation. So sometimes people come to us and say, I'm only going to sell my onions this year, right? I don't care about the rest of those. I don't need them to be certified.
Okay.
We certify land. So if you want to certify, this square of land, and this is where your onions are, and say you want to plant them over here next year because you're rotating, we need to certify and verify what was there for 3 years as well. So sometimes it's easier to do everything. It depends. If you have real mixed plots, we still need to go through all your seeds, all your inputs. If you're doing like real mixed plantings.
Okay, so the farm we are counting on, so is satisfied. The farm is certified.
Okay.
Okay, so what do I have to do?
You as a farmer would, so if you are certifying individually, so the land can be certified. This is kind of a funny middle ground. We can only put one entity per certificate. So even if you're farming on, say maybe the Gardens of Eden, it's huge certified organic plot, and there are 20 different farmers doing their own thing. They're all doing it organically, but they're all individual businesses. They all have to individually certify. Yeah, we're not allowed to put more than one. We used to do that in the past, and they slapped everybody on the wrist, so no more. Yeah.
So certification is primarily for wholesale?
It's up to you. Some people, farm depends on your market. Then that's where it's a choice. If you want to advertise as organic, in order to say certified, you have to be certified. So certainly wholesale often requires it. Sometimes it's a benefit at a market. Depends on your market and how you market it and advertise it, right? Some people say, oh, I don't think I'll get a premium. I don't think it matters if I put a giant banner up, and other people feel that it gives them, you know, they get more customers, and they get a higher price. You know, that's a choice. Does that answer your question?
I mean, say if I just wanted to grow for myself, but I'm not, I want to do the wholesale and all that kind of good stuff. But if I just want to just grow for like medium to whoever, like family-wise, certification still required?
No, I mean, if you're just growing for your family, no, you're not required to be certified. It's only if you're advertising, marketing, labeling. We're a labeling program.
So if you wanted to start out as organic, testing the waters, grow it for your own family to get the correct, everything correct before you decide to go step out into the big field, that's a way to do it.
Absolutely, yeah, there's no requirement to be certified for any period of time. You can certify this year and say, oh, I didn't make anything, that wasn't worth it. Maybe, or I'm gonna change my whole farm around and I'm only gonna farm a little bit next year, so I'm not gonna bother next year, that's okay, you can come back. Again, as long as you keep records of what you've done in the meantime. We have to be able to verify 3 years, each plot of land, 36 months before harvest. And so that gets into a lot of records. We'll come to some of that, but
What if you're looking at buying a place and they're like, oh yeah, we can this for only 5 years, but they never certified, and it's like, they have to wait 3 more years?
you guys have all the good questions.
Oh.
Yeah. Same questions?
There's a horse pasture or something. Yeah, like there's a tree farm, and like, oh, it's your dad wants to be a farm, but it's never been as
So,
far as we know.
as far as you know, right? Yeah. So if you're new to a piece of land and somebody tells you, I can rent you this land, this is certifiable, I haven't done a thing, if they're willing to sign their name on a page that says, this is what I've done, I've not applied anything at all, or if I applied something, this is what it was, or I didn't plant anything, they do have to sign, and they're signing their name, you know, that, and we'll accept that as an affidavit.
And then is there a way doing across the street on their farm? Like if they're not in the spring or they're not growing or not, they have to impact your ability to get certified.
It depends, probably not if it's across the street.
Okay.
We will come to buffers.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, yep.
You guys certify every crop? I think somebody asked that question earlier.
We would certify anything you could grow here.
Okay, that's
Yes, anything that's legal to grow, yes. Anything we feel we have the capability to do, and I don't know that we've been hit with anything in Minnesota that we haven't. We're allowed to certify hemp now, you're just not allowed to process it. So it's kind of wasteful. But, but that's very regulated. Talk about regulated.
So like the previous owner of the land signed after the website, we could wait for 3 years, and we would be certified for
You can be certified the first year, even on a new plot of land. If you haven't managed it, if someone else is willing to sign what's often called a prior land use affidavit, that they'll state that they applied nothing or explain what they've done, which is sometimes okay, then we'll take that. You don't have to, no, you don't have to, you as a farmer don't have to do soil tests. We might do testing. That's kind of our purview and requirement. We do some testing. We're required to test at least 5% of our operations for chemical residue, et cetera, prohibited substances, as we call them, every year. So minimum of 5%. So you could be selective. Sometimes we're random, sometimes we hear something, so then we go on purpose and target someone. Yeah.
Is land that you purchase some land and if that previous owner isn't available, is CRP records acceptable as the previous land use?
If you can get them.
Or just the fact that it's in a CRP contract?
If you can get verification that it's in a CRP contract without waivers, yes. Sometimes the challenge is the FSA won't give that out without prior
We
permission.
currently have it.
Oh, you do? Okay, well then that, if it's very clear of what land is in the contract, Yep, and then we can do, yeah, no, we'll take that. CRP will take, as long as we're sure there's no waivers to it. Conservation Reserve Program. It's a farm program. You'll find it more further away from the city, land that's been set aside for various reasons. But it's a government program that is for preventing erosion, protecting habitat, and most of the time you're not allowed to do anything with it.
Is that part of the NRCS program?
I don't believe, CRP I think goes through FSA, Farm Service Agency, and then up.
You can, let cattle
No, typically you can't even.
unless you get a waiver, it's like during some droughts, there'll be waivers, you know, depends on them.
Okay, right, yep. Yeah. Okay, oh, yes.
So let's say for 5,000 exemptions, right? Let's say, can I use the USDA label?
No.
Organic?
Not for exemption, no, definitely not.
What does it mean by exemption?
So exemption from certification is what an exemption is. And so in vegetables are where you'll hear about it by far the most in at farmers markets, is people will say, but I sell less than $5,000, I don't have to be certified.
What isn't it voluntary or
In order to advertise as organic.
Oh, okay.
In order to use the word organic. If you're exempt, you can't say certified.
Which you could say organic, but not
If you
certified.
qualify, yep.
You still have to apply.
Nope, that's the odd one.
Okay.
No, you don't have to apply. So if you sell less than $5,000 in product and you follow all the regulations and you understand what those are, you can sell as organic. You definitely do not use the USDA symbol. Do not say you're certified. This is still federally regulated. The NOP is not happy if people use their symbol when they're not supposed to. That's one that the feds do tend to get involved on. Yeah, that's a big no-no. Yeah, so you do have to follow all the regulations. And the challenge of people who say I'm certified, I follow those, is often they don't know what they're following exactly. They have a good sense of it. But as you guys go through these programs, you'll learn a bit more about what it really takes to. So.
Are you required to indicate that you're not USDA organic certified? You just said this is organic, grown locally, whatever.
You can say that if you're under, $5,000 in gross sales for the year, and you do follow all the regulations. You might still, depends, on where you're selling it and who you're selling it to and who will accept that. It can't be used in a processed product in any way. So if you've got your neighbor makes salsa and they label it organic, even if you're exempt, you cannot sell it to them because their product's organic and certified.
So if you go above the $5,000 mark during the process certification, but you're a year away, so people kind of get around by saying it's naturally grown, it's grown without use of blah blah blah.
If they're clearly descriptive but not saying organic, the challenge is there's not a lot of resources to enforce this stuff. If we hear about complaints, sometimes we'll call or write a letter or go to a farmer's market. Sometimes it gets funneled right to the feds and they might look into it. It depends upon if there's actually a complaint, how it gets routed. But that gets messy.
It's like you're following it all, but you're just not quite there at the certification. But you let people know you're not spraying.
Yeah, if you're very specific, you say, the challenge is these claims out there are pretty vague, right? Natural, there's no definition legal, other than you can't have sulfites and those sorts of things. Pesticide free, what does that mean? That one gets thrown around a lot. Or no spray. Well, that doesn't mean they didn't use synthetic fertilizers or treated seeds. It just means they didn't spray something on the plant. That doesn't mean organic, though it gets used that way. It gets understood. We don't regulate no spray. Okay, our steps. All right, so step 1, organic system plans. We're applying, and that includes the organic system plan, so the meat of it all. So again, back to our citations, our regulations. 205, 201 are one of our favorite ones, and this is why you have to have an organic system plan. Organic is all built around having an organic system plan. That's what the regulations focus on, is that says that you describe what you're going to do, how and when and where, and sign off on it. And then our job is to say, yes, this fits with an organic, this fits the organic regulations and all the production practices that come later. But you have to write it out and explain how you qualify, how you follow organic standards. And so that this is, the real base, this is a big one. You have to have a plan, and it gets into practices and procedures. So this is everything from soil fertility to crop rotation to preventing spray from your neighbors to keeping something organic from a non-organic crop if you happen to have both, to where you're going to store it and how you're going to sell it. It's a list of procedures, and every OSP will walk through from sort of what do you want to certify to the end of where you're going to sell it. Other things that are very specific, you have to have a list of substances. That's where we come up with these material lists, and you may, if you're having a class on materials used at MFA, but every certified organic farmer will either have a materials list or state they use no materials, because we do have to approve those for use on your farm specifically. Just because, say, your farm gets approved for this one, we still have to approve it for your farm separately. Generally, that's fairly easy, but we do have to do it.
What about the published, what is this per farm, but in general, like what materials are okay?
Yes and yes. What materials are okay to use? So I didn't go through all this. I think it's toward the end, but there is a place called OMRI, the Organic Materials Review Institute, and all certifiers use that. We look there a lot. That is an organization, companies pay them to review their products so they can stamp it and say, yes, this is allowed for use in organic systems. That's one place to look, but they don't have to be listed there because not all companies want to pay for that. There's a number of lists like that out there for specific branded product names. There's also, well, I don't have it on this one, but the very end of the regulations, of the organic regulations, is the national list of allowed and prohibited substances. This is generic. It says things like, calcium carbonate, different, sometimes scientific names, sometimes not, things that are generally, if it's natural, it's allowed. If it's synthetic, it's not allowed. And then there are some exemptions to each of those. But then determining what's synthetic is a lot of fun. That's our job. Yes, Finley.
I know that you said last year that it doesn't, if it's on OMRI, doesn't mean that it's okay for humans.
Right.
You still have to ask the guys.
You still have to list it. You still have to have in the regulations your list of substances, and we have to agree to it.
Do you get approval first before you use it?
Yes. There's a little bit of wiggle room there. We probably aren't going to give you a non-compliance unless you do lots of using things without telling us. But part of the reason that you want to get it approved before you use it is because even if it's on an OMRI list, there are lots of restrictions. And sometimes we have to be able to say, yep, yours. And there are times where we'll say farmer A is allowed to use that material. But you know what, farmer B, that one doesn't work because your system is very different. It's not that we don't like you or not. It's just that your farm system is a little bit different. Some things are on the OMRI list for livestock, not allowed for crops. Or processing, not allowed for livestock. So we highly recommend that every time you get it approved before you use it. You're better off asking for approval than begging for and sometimes you can't return them. Either depends on it's expensive to return if you find out that's not a good one.
I'm just going to get to this, probably 2 comments on question. So I guess I wasn't thinking
Livestock's totally different. We're going to focus
Or you
on.
could just keep them separate, so you're like, that doesn't influence your vegetable certification.
Oh, yeah, livestock is totally a different so it's a different part of the regulations, and you don't have to certify it, just like you don't have to certify every crop or every field. Yeah, in vegetables though, yep, it's manure, and we'll come to that. In manure is just like in food safety, they're even tighter, they're getting tighter than we are with it. We used to be the difficult ones, but quite restricted. And I think I have somewhere, I'll come to that. Let's see. Yep, so general organic system plan, they tend to be fairly long. If you've seen the one going around, we're at 20 pages and there's attachments. A lot of check boxes though is the good news. And certifiers do a lot of question answering on what does this question mean? How do I fill this out? Like we're here for that. So you want to, in your organic system, describe everything. Yes?
I can say, why would one unlisted product be okay on one farm and not on another?
There's a few restrictions. The most common one is micronutrients. There are some synthetic micronutrients that are allowed for use. That's one of the weird exemptions or allowances, specific allowances. Some products have them. Some don't, many don't. But if you find a product that has some of these synthetic micronutrients in it, it can have an OMRI certificate, but it will have a restriction that you have to have a test to document deficiency. You can't use it unless you can show you need it. And so one farm might not have low levels, and another farm might. That's a common one.
If you can document your deficiency, you can get a waiver for that.
To use it.
To use it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and typically if we give something, we allow you to use it, we'll have some interval for testing. There's no, it could be a soil test, it could be a tissue test. Those are not terribly expensive, is the good news. And not a bad thing to do either, to find out what's in your soil. Micronutrients are more commonly used in organic. They're getting more common in conventional, but you'll also, there's naturally available, I'm probably getting too much into micronutrients or into input detail, but there's naturally available ones that we don't restrict, like in kelp or fish. Those are naturally occurring, but then there are specific synthetic ones that are allowed and get added to products.
So why would they allow something on the premises not to have it?
That's been a lot of just constant discussion. The National Organic Standards Board is an appointed board that sits under the NOP, and every few years goes through every substance on that list and looks at it and says, is this necessary for organic agriculture for some reason? Does it have low toxicity? Is there an organic alternative? There's a whole series of criteria they use. And boy, is there a lot of arguing over it. I don't want to get involved in that myself.
I would think it would depend largely on the locale of the farm. Central U.S., Eastern, West, all soils have different consistencies.
Yeah.
And if you're in California, you're lacking micronutrients that are familiar to growing a certain product on the East Coast. And rather than shipping it from the East Coast to California, they can grow it there and get that waiver.
Yeah, exactly. And even around here, we will see, depends on how your land has been used in the past. If you find a dairy farm that's been around for a long time, that had been a dairy for years, but it's been sitting there and you're going to grow vegetables now, it probably is going to have very different levels of nutrients than the next farm over that didn't have animals on it. So there's a lot of variation out there. That's the main. Yes.
And the question is about resources for testing and so far. The only one I know was the University of Minnesota or universities. Is
Yeah.
that the only resource?
The most common one we see, I would say, what are they? Midwest Labs. We should get on and look it up. It's in Nebraska. I want to say it's around $30 or $40 for a soil test that'll give you quite a good panel of things. Everything from basic NPK and organic matter through the micronutrients. That's a common lab that we see used. The university doesn't tend to do as many micronutrient type tests. They tend to do NPK. They're they're learning organic. They're getting better and better all the time.
Is there a preferred time of year to send your soils in for testing?
Well, I would say, so I'm definitely not a soils expert. I know enough to be dangerous. If you're going to do it, you want to do it, and you want to do it over the years. The one thing you want to do is to always take it at the same time, because different things are available at different times of the year. That's the one thing I would say. And I think you have some more soils people coming up, right?
We had our soil lady, even though I'm not going to ask that question.
Oh, I did.
I'm not sure myself either, but.
Yeah.
You can ask them all.
Oh, there you go. Yep. Okay, so organic system plan. Did someone have a question? Oh, it was the little guy. Okay. Very good. I thought I heard a voice. So you want to describe in your system plan, there's all different pieces to these things. So there's a basic crop one. Most certifiers will have a separate greenhouse one. If you are using a greenhouse, if there's a livestock operation, there's a separate livestock. There's all kinds of pieces. But in the end, what you want to do is describe what you're doing. If you're going through your system plan and you realize at the end that you didn't tell somebody, the questions didn't ask you some piece of it, call us and ask where to put it, because we're better off making sure it's okay before we come to inspection and getting to that point, and then realizing that there's a bunch of stuff to figure out at that point. So in the end, the big picture is be in touch with us. So let's see, land requirements, just walking down. So we're still following down the numbers. So we were at 200, now we're at 202, or we're at 201 for the organic system plan. This is 202. So it walks through this history of your land. So farm parcel from which harvested crops. Harvested is where we start from and go backwards for 36 months. No prohibited substances in the period of 3 years immediately preceding harvest. So if you're back to the onions, harvesting, onions in, say, August or September, you can start from that date and go, that's how far back I have to document 3 years from. Or if I'm going to do radishes, that's much earlier, right? If you're doing them early. Usually it's easier just to get it as far back, back past that a little bit, in case, you're getting someone to sign something for you, or you're documenting your history a little bit further back is sometimes safer, but not required. It's just a little easier if suddenly you realize you are going to plant something early and you didn't think about that right away. Like, oh, I thought I was really just going to plant a bunch of, late fall crops because I'm going to be, busy till then. But then, oh, somebody wants lettuce. So if you're starting out, it can be easier just to go back a little further. Other than that, so this is where the buffer part comes in. So distinct, defined boundaries and buffer zones. The purpose is to prevent outside non-allowed prohibited substances from coming onto your farm. So, let's see, I think I even have a picture. You guys have done some map work, I guess, right? But here's just a little example somebody came up with. So here's a map of, say, they want to certify these 3 fields. And they've got all their land history, and either somebody signed and said it's acceptable, or you've got all the records of what you've been doing for 3 years. And then you kind of look around, what's all around the edges of my farm? Like, here's a road. Good, back to the road question. Across the road, conventional crops. Typically, a road is enough of a buffer. Buffers are all over the board on how big they need to be. All the regulations say is sufficient to prevent contamination. So that's where there's a rule of thumb out there that 25 feet is what you need, but there's nothing written in the regulations that says you must have 25 feet. Sometimes they're this wide, sometimes they're 100 feet. It's very variable. Yes? There does not have to be a tree line, but if there is, then your tree line is often sufficient. If it's a thick enough tree line, because that will catch things, we'll consider that sufficient unless you, in the end, this is, well, we haven't gotten to monitoring, but one of the parts of the organic system plan that you have to describe as you walk through is description of your monitoring practices. So this is, in this case, we're talking about buffers. So it's you as a farmer, because we can't be there every day, observing your field, seeing what's going on, what your neighbor's up to, walking around, checking it as you're out there. You're telling us how you do this. This is your system plan. But to say, okay, I know neighbor on the, I know this guy, he's organic. We don't have to worry there. We know he's, say, whether he's certified or not, it depends on the certifier, but, sometimes what you get is him to sign a little letter that says, if he's not certified, that says, I use organic practices. I don't spray chemicals, and we'll take that as great. You don't need a buffer in that kind of case. Where you've got a road, typically that's fine, like I said. But the job of the farmer is to monitor and watch. They were out there spraying yesterday. Maybe I should take a walk and look and see, did anything come my way? Do I see any effect? In vegetables, it's quick. You usually see that right away. They're fairly susceptible, depending upon the chemical used. Not always, though. Sometimes if your neighbor is using something like a fungicide, that may not injure a vegetable plant. So it's you being out there and just being aware of what's going on, kind of knowing what your neighbor's doing. If you're new to a farm, we'd probably say, you know what, that sounds good enough. That's a road. A road is 25 feet in itself, plus there's often a bit of ditches on the side. And almost always a road is fine. But if you see something that happens, you have to let us know. Yes?
Is there any advice on how, when you're looking for land, to figure out, who your neighbors are and what they're doing?
Well, don't go in the winter when it's snow covered. You could chat with them. The easiest things to not have to worry about are hedgerows, tree lines, wetlands, forests. But as far as what they're doing, your red flags as far as conventional farm are typically corn and soybeans. That's what most conventional farms, there's others too, but most conventional farmers in the upper Midwest are growing corn, soy, corn, soy, corn, soy. Those are often the GMO crops, routinely sprayed. The things to keep an eye out on are mostly, not always though, our prevailing winds are from the west. So a little bit, more caution on the west side because it's more likely, but not necessarily so, that when they're spraying, it's coming this way. That's not always true. We do get storms from the east, right?
And they also usually don't spray under 5 miles per hour because then it doesn't settle.
Mostly not. Yeah, so.
Considerations for, because I am looking at a place and it's surrounded by some conventional farms, but they're mostly cattle feedlots. Are there issues with those? Runoff or?
Runoff, yes, that'd be the main issue on a feedlot. Just because they're typically not gonna, usually a feedlot depends on what kind of feedlot it is, but there's almost nothing growing if it's truly a feedlot. You'd want to look at, is there a downhill slope? Because that's a lot of manure. That's also something to look at if you're looking at land is this guy conventional? And is maybe this farm is up here and your farm's down here and there's a bit of a hill? That's something that you would need a bigger buffer on typically, depending upon what's between them. Just because, say they plant in, late April or early May, with treated seeds and synthetic nitrogen, and they put a pre-emergent herbicide down, and a huge rain comes, right? We're getting more rain events all the time, and it washes down into your land. That can cause 3 years. So that's something to keep an eye out for, especially a downhill slope. Sometimes you can't get everything in land. It's hard to find land. It's expensive, right? You have to take what you can get. You can certainly plant a hedgerow. They take a little while to come, right? So a nice option. Yeah.
That
questions. I have been to a farm that the two farms are very close to each other, and the other land are different farm, very close to the border. And then when they spray to the corn, because they're not organic, and it's killing off the crops on this side. So, for example, in the future, if we look for a land like that, any recommendation what we should do for not getting that problem, or what we should do to protect our?
Well, I would say make sure you can walk the land, the perimeters, if you're looking at land, you can, don't go when there's so much snow that you can't see what's there, and that you can go to the far corners and see, what does it look like? Does it look like that? Or is there hay and it's very green, or is it something you can just tell there's a lot of stems sticking out of? Like it's been maybe in CRP, or it's just left wild. I would just make sure to definitely look around. If you're looking at buying land, you can certainly, it's up to you and who will tell you what, but you can go to the neighbors and talk to them and see if you'll find out if they're friendly or not too. You can't always do that when you're buying land. There's realities of what's available and that sort of thing. But yeah, I would say the main thing to look for is, even in the wintertime, you can see that's been formed recently. Maybe it's managed organically. There's more and more organic corn out there, but the vast majority of corn is not organic. To answer your question.
I was wondering, like, for example, if we end up buying a land like that, do we have to leave big space to not growing? So if we won't, are we not growing, or
Yes.
in other different ways?
Yeah, if you're even not having lived there and been there, there's spray on your side, you need to leave a good space there. That's a challenging situation, because to get a neighbor to stop that if they've been doing it for a long time, you'd have 3 years to wait, because there's good chemicals there, even to not have a bigger buffer. But they're probably going to keep doing it. And if it's going under your land, that's one, if you know that's happening, I would say just be very cautious with that.
Talk with the other farmer to see, hey, can you spray 20 feet in and this, so that it can blow over on his field rather than yours?
If they're willing to, And some are, many are not. It's real variable out there. We had a few this year of very long-term organic farmers. They're out in, big farmland, big sprayer country out in western Minnesota, have overspray, and they've never had it before. Landed on their crops. So there's risk of having conventional contamination. You can sign up for things, like Drift Watch, whether or not they check that. And another question, in the end, you want to protect yourself. Driftwatch is I think it's driftwatch.org. It's a program. You have to sign up for it. You go online and you enter in your farm information, your address. I forget exactly what all you enter in, but basically it's what sprayers are supposed to check before they go out and spray. Do they do that? Another question, but it's just one more step of, I've announced that I'm a specialty crop, and you don't have to be organic to be on there, because every vegetable grower is worried about overspray, whether or not they're organic.
Dicamba is a big one with the conventional farms right now.
Yes. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one this year. Yeah, it is. Yeah, we have more and more dicamba. That's another, that one can come from a long ways away. Monitoring. As a farmer, you can do your best to monitor. But unfortunately, the legal situation on that one is just not good right now, personally, I would say. But I think I have some buffer pictures. So you guys have done some maps. You can do hand-drawn maps. That's just a simple example. We went through some of this. Let's see, again, just making sure you mark your map real clearly. I think I had this one in here as an example of, you might know what your farm is here, but we have no idea. Just, making sure that you identify. Okay, I'm marking it out because what we certify specific, maybe it's just 1 acre, maybe it's 40 acres, maybe it's 600, but we certify real specific plots of land.
So why wouldn't you just do the whole thing? Or is it more expensive or something to do more like, I have 29 acres and I'm only going to certify 10?
Yep.
Why not just do the rest?
There's a lot of different reasons why people do or don't certify their whole property. It typically is, it depends. It's typically not more expensive, though. I mean, that is something if you're shopping around for certifiers, you can ask for an estimate of what is this going to cost me. Often they'll ask a lot of questions of, you'll have to provide them with information because we need to know what we would be certifying to give an estimate. There is a certifier or two out there, and it's been a little while since I've been on the certifier street that goes by acres in terms of how they price. We don't. Most of the common ones around here don't.
It might also just be the farmer's prerogative. 20 acres is a lot of work, 10 is half that, so.
And it's your choice on what you certify again. Like if back to a simple, well, actually here's an even better one. Lots of different fields. Maybe this farmer is growing, lots of field crops, and they have a livestock farm and they're growing most of this for feed, but over here they have one plot they want to, sell as organic. And so sometimes people will just certify one field. There's less records in a way. It depends on what you're doing. There can be less records to keep. In the end, if you're only certifying one crop, we're still going to look at what else are you growing, and can we verify that you can keep it separate from the organic, that you can keep records that show that you can keep it separate. And that you sell it separately, you harvest it separately, all of those, transport it, and that you are very clear and can do that. Often it's easier just to certify the whole plot. Yeah, I mean, often no matter what, we're going to look at all those records anyway. Depends. I mean, we do have the right to look at any non-organic records. Most of the time we don't. But once in a while, especially if somebody has organic and non-organic, we will say, okay, let's make sure we can verify that what was not organic was sold as not organic.
So I was just going to say, so it may not be cost effective if you were just certifying only one piece.
Yeah, it depends on what you're doing.
You were required to do double work, right? Because now you have to carry it, transport it separately, you have to harvest it separately, like you say.
Yep. Yeah, you'd have to keep it separately. Yep. But at the same time, mostly, it can add to more work to not certify at all. Again, everybody's a little different. Each year is a little different.
Did you say, is this only 1 year?
So you apply and go through this whole steps to certification process every year. Your certificate does not expire, but you do have to apply every year or else we'll pull it. And yes, so it is every year. It's updating your application every year, getting an inspection every year, paying your fees every year, getting a new certificate every year. Yep, essentially the same process, but once you're in the system, it gets a little bit easier because we don't, we have, and most certifiers do have an OSP. You fill it out once, and then the next year you get the same one back again or something very similar, and you update it. You don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to provide us 3 years of history unless you have new land. Okay, so
Is it the fees are based on acres or?
very,
Is it a flat fee?
it's by certify. Every certifier is different. I can say ours is, there's a flat fee for certification, and then we charge based on what you sell as organic after that. That's how it becomes progressive. So a bigger farmer pays more. A little farmer doesn't pay, very much on their sales. Yeah.
Can you give us some numbers about, to give us an idea of how much organic certification costs?
Yeah. quick number for a year of a new small farm is probably 800, in that range, 7, 9, variable. Every year. Right now, there's cost share. And that is good through this year. We'll see if it continues. So if you certify, for the first time this year, or you've been certified, you pay your fees up front. Then you apply through the state. In Minnesota, we're applying through the state. You submit your invoice, and we give them your certificate. They pay up to $750 or 75% back. It's a kind of a rebate, but you have to pay everything up front. It takes, this year they're still paying out from last year, so you don't get it back right away. And that's only we have it this year. And it's up to, if anybody's interested in, talking to the legislators, we'll see if it goes into the next farm bill or not. The farm bill is supposed to get reauthorized this year. So it's been present every year till now. Who knows?
I just think for small, do you mean like 5 acres or 10 acres? What's your idea of small?
Yes, both. Yeah.
I was looking at the application here. I don't have like a business name yet, and then later I register at the state business. I change it within the year, or would I have to go next year?
No, good question. So yeah, if you apply and you don't have a farm name, but you're applying under your name, and you register with the state and get a Fenley's Organic Acres, whatever you want to call yourself, you would just contact us and let us know. Usually we would have you send in the certificate from the Secretary of State, and then we'll just change your certificate. And I can't speak for other certifiers, we wouldn't charge for that. But yeah, we would want to update it to be the correct name. Yes. While I'm thinking about it, random comments. If you're thinking of naming your farm something with organic in the name, be very careful that you are organic all the way through, that there's not part organic and part non-organic. They don't tend to like that. That's considered yeah. So just be aware as you're thinking about that. Okay, we did. Oh yeah, there were some just pictures of buffers that I had, as we've already talked about them. You guys have some pretty good ideas of this out there, but yeah, very different if there's big booms. That can necessitate 20 or 50 feet versus that's definitely a good buffer. We would say you don't need to do anything else. That's thick and solid and not going to prevent, it's not going to prevent dicamba, but at this point we're going with that. Yeah, and there's a lot of differences. Like here, good example, you can see this one's going downhill. So if your farm is down here, be aware of runoff. If you're buying land, look for ditches or culverts. Once in a blue moon, I've seen this very seldomly, they'll run under a road and carry things underneath the road onto another farm. Creeks are often okay. Honestly, your bigger concern there is if you're raising vegetables, and I'm thinking just about everybody is, that the vegetables could get flooded out. That's more of a problem for food safety in the end. Yeah, we had one of those at a vegetable farm last year, and we did end up doing some E. coli and testing just to make sure that the crops were okay. It happens once in a while. So yeah, look for creeks, because as the weather continues to change, we're seeing a lot more. Well, I'll just go on running. I don't know what I did. So organic system plan. You guys fill out a field history. That we've talked about that a little bit, but essentially this needs to match your map. So on that, there was a picture at the beginning where there were 3 fields, west, middle, and east. You name your fields, and you name your fields based on something that you're managing in the same way. So if this field is all, say, cover crop this year, and this other field is all mixed vegetables, we would call those 2 fields. Different rotation plan, different, it's how you're managing it, and that gets into a lot of details. But essentially, we need to know that it needs to match your map. What do you want to certify? What do you call it? How big is it? And what have you been raising there? This is another place that those inputs go. So, materials allowed, not allowed. We have you list everything. This is a little bit older one now. I didn't update this. But say for this year, you were filling this out. You would list what you're planning to use here. You don't have to use all that stuff. You can change. But we ask for a plan. So that we can say, yeah, this fits with the fertility plan they've presented. It fits with the rotation plan they've described in the OSP that, for vegetables, you're going to grow, brassicas and onions and Solanaceae in the 4th year is a cover crop year or something. That type of, you'll give us your plan for rotation. This is all, it's an organic, the other thing to note is this is all a plan. Organic system plan, field plan. We don't hold you exactly to every word in there, but you have to stick with the general spirit of it or let us know. And say, hey, I filled this out this way and I said I would do this, but guess what? Something happened, life, farm, equipment broke, whatever it is, you call us and tell us and update your system plan. Field history, we've gone through this a little bit. How am I doing on time, Laura?
About an hour left.
Okay.
I was going to mention just something too, that MFA does have all of the records of what's been planted in everyone's fields last year, and everyone here, except for Lou and except for Sam, everyone else's land was just in cover crop last year. So I didn't provide people with a map, so that's easy.
Lovely.
But I owe you a map of what was in your field last year, and I also owe. Well, Lou, I think we talked about it, but Louis doesn't know if you want to know.
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead of this one. Oh, so here's an example. These are on our website. There's every certifier has forms. The federal government has forms that you can use, but this is just an example. We've talked about getting somebody to sign on a prior land use statement. This is just the top of it, but that's the type of form you can use. Certifiers have them available for you to, we can mail them or download, that type of thing. Well, good question. I would say, what certifier to use? The biggest thing is that you can get your questions answered and you can work with them well. Everybody is under the same standards. Like we all are accredited to administer the federal organic regulations. There's different personalities in different certifiers for sure. I would say definitely use someone personal, locally based. It doesn't have to be in Minnesota, but somebody who is based in the region at the very least. You want somebody who has farmers reasonably near you. That will decrease your inspection cost. You do pay the cost of the inspection, the time, and it depends on how the inspector bills, and that's where some of the variation in cost comes, but you pay for their mileage if they have to stay overnight somewhere, that type of thing. So if there's lots of farms in your area that are certified by somebody, it often makes it a little bit cheaper. We also, if we're based locally or reasonably locally, we tend to have a lot more inspectors in the area as opposed to somebody who is based on the east or the west coast. You can certify with any of those. Typically you'll find corporations or big farms going with them because they're on big scale and they're more interested in distribution systems that maybe some of their clients are already using. But yeah, there's quite a few that do operate around here. Yeah, and it's very personality based. You can call around and ask for cost estimates, and say, hey, I'm planning on growing 5 acres of this, and this. This is where I live. Can you give me an idea of what that would cost?
Yes, I guess we talked about, for example, small penny or firm or whatever, then like $800, that would just be like for certification, like the inspection is an additional cost?
Nope, that's included. Yeah, and that's my very quick estimate. That's not far off of, especially a first year average. Some certifiers, everybody posts their, no, actually they don't. Most post their fees online so you can look and compare. Some have just these tiered, if you make $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, this is what it will cost you. And they just have an amount by dollar amount. Ours are just by percentage so that it works its way up. If you have a good year, you pay more. If you have a bad year, you pay less.
This is an extension.
Mhm.
I guess, at what amount of, post income, whatever you're on, do you think it's like a good idea to get
Certified? Gross income. Yeah, that's real variable based on what's important to you. I mean, we've got everything. We have quite a few people that don't make very much and certify because they believe in it. You certainly don't have to do that. In terms of economics, that's a big question. With the cost share program, it makes it reasonably affordable. You end up paying in the $200 some range every year yourself that way. And so looking at it that way, how much do you have to make that worthwhile? Very much a personal question and a market question as far as can I make more money? Can I sell to where I want to sell? Yeah, that's a hard one. I think, were you next? Yeah, I think so.
So how long does the process take from the point where you submit the application?
Good question.
Signed, inspector, overall, how long does it take?
All over the board, but if you apply early, it might take, the time length is a little bit longer, but you probably get your certification earlier. So this whole process, so application, all these documents we've been talking about, you send us all of these, right? And the reason it's hard to give an estimate is we get every range of incredible amounts of detail in these things to not very much detail. And if we don't have enough information, we go back to you guys and ask questions and wait for answers, and it depends upon how quick that back and forth is. Then once we have enough information, our job is to say, it looks like you're capable of complying with the regulations, is how the regs read. We have to say, this is a potentially certifiable firm, reasonably certifiable. And once we are at that point, then we can send it to an inspector. It depends on inspector availability, whether or not they can get there, next week or 4 weeks. And that's based on, did we get your application in February or did we get it in June when our inspectors are booked for the next month and a half, sort of thing. Earlier the better. But so inspector does their inspection. They send the report to us. We send you a copy. You pay for the inspection if you haven't already. And then we review. So we go back through everything again. We take out our organic system plan, we take all the maps, field histories, the material lists, the inspection report, and anything the inspector sent back to us, or anything you've sent us in between, and read through everything. Often that goes to some back and forth with questions of, there was something missing, we need you to send us this, we don't understand what this really is here, it's not clear. And that, sometimes we don't have any questions, and it's fairly quick. Sometimes that takes us a whole year. Based on, can we get a CRP history? It would seem like we were going to be able to get this, but guess what? Somebody wouldn't give us that document. So if everything goes very well, it can be a few months. So you get a certificate.
Otherwise, it could take a year.
Well, that's the worst case scenario, really. Usually especially as a vegetable, if you want to certify vegetables in the first year, apply early. Come early, just because we want to make sure we get your file reviewed, because right now we are getting stacks of mail every day.
What's considered early? Like, when is your season?
Like ideally February would be does it have to be then? No. I mean, could it be March or April? But just from our end, we get stacks of mail from everybody at this time of year, and so we have to prioritize. We've already certified some people, but they have something new we need to add. We have all these new people, so okay, we look at them and say, usually most of us put the vegetables at the top of the pile just because you guys harvest first, as opposed to somebody with corn who can wait a while. But we do try to juggle that. But if we don't get the application in a time when we know, say you ended up buying a farm, I don't know where, in New Rochester, for example, okay, and somebody else bought a farm up near Princeton, right? They found some good land, they liked it up there, and you're by Rochester, and the week before we sent an inspector to Rochester for 5 farms, and now you're the only one down there. It's kind of do we charge you for the inspector to go down there for themselves, or do we think we're going to get somebody else? It's a lot of juggling. So yeah, that's why I say the earlier the better. It just helps with planning. It's not required, at least on our end, we don't require a first-year farmer to apply at any time. It just makes it more efficient for all of us.
Did you say what happens when you're just let's say your land gets contaminated with manure from the farm above you or drift from conventional farms? Did you say what happens to your certification?
It varies. That is very much a case-by-case issue. There's a variety of what is the spray? Is it something we can find in a test? Can we get there in time to test for it? What does the test show? It can cause loss of certification for 3 years. It can cause loss of certification for the crop. Honestly, in vegetables, you're probably not going to be able to sell it at all anyway, because most of these chemicals are not registered for use on vegetables.
Does this happen a lot?
Not a lot. No. I would say less than tiny percent of our farms have this happen. It's not super common, but you do want to be aware of it and prevent it. Yeah, absolutely. Down the 200s, we did 201 was the system plan, 202 land requirements, 203 is soil fertility. So this is something you get to work with lots at MFA on how to build soil, maintain soil, the basic part of organic reg certification, and just management. Everything is based around healthy soil and at the very least maintaining the qualities of your soil. So this is all practices you describe. Do you use cover crops? Do you cover your soil in the winter? Do you use summer cover crops? Do you use manure, which can be allowed? Or does stuff like this happen, where, this is what we want to prevent is erosion. This is not maintaining soil, right? So pretty basic. There's a lot of things that go on in between those zones. But you are required to maintain or improve the physical, chemical, or biological condition of the soil and minimize erosion. And so that's one of our actual regulations that, this is where it starts. Take care of the soil. It doesn't take care of everything that might happen on your farm, but that's important. Among other things, good soil quality tends to prevent erosion. Covering the soil prevents erosion. Gives you nutrients back for your crop, your next crop. Still part of, 203, managing fertility. Manure always comes up with vegetables. This is a lovely rotation if you can keep birds out. I know, MFA's got some birds on the side, but we do have vegetable farmers who, that's a really nice rotation. They might not certify their birds, but 1 year grow vegetables, and the next year that turns into a chicken pasture. And then maybe 2 years later, they grow vegetables there again. Great source of fertility, right? If you want to do that sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. I must get to the manure standard here, I think. But yeah, the manure standard. Well, we'll get is it's in here. 90 or it's food safety essentially, what everybody's having to comply with again. But it's 90. Yeah, I know I get to that. 90 days for crops that do not contact the soil, and 120 days if the crop has contact with the soil. So that's the raw manure standard. Even if you do have livestock, there is a composting standard as well, or if you get off-farm manure from somewhere else, and you compost it, generally most people don't bother with the organic compost regulations, to be quite honest. It's too much record keeping. They just apply the compost, the manure, even if it's composted as manure according to the manure standards. Not to say that you can't do compost, but
The standards are like how long it's been composted?
it's turning and temperatures, carbon and nitrogen ratio, how many times you turn it, and you have to keep records of it. So most people who are farming vegetables have enough records to keep and just don't end up bothering to be, I don't want to say you shouldn't do it, but it's just the reality of what they created.
So you're saying as long as you wait 90 to 120 days, you don't have to worry?
From the date of application and incorporation, so you'd have to incorporate it into the soil. And so 90 is if it doesn't have contact with the soil. Well, what is contact? Most vegetables have contact. Clearly a tomato, that's, even if it's trellised, rainwater splashes, we take that as contact. If it's mulched really heavily, we would call that 120. Or if you've got plastic mulch, that can be 120. But contact with the soil can be something, that far off the ground, just because rainwater splashes so much. So most vegetables you have to use, if you're using raw manure, it's 120 days ahead of harvest. And that now follows the food safety rules that you'll get to hear about too. Or they followed us, actually. So I jumped ahead. Let me see if I skipped anything. I just had some pictures of crop rotation. I think we'll skip that one because there's a lot more to come here. There are some Spanish versions. Oh yeah. Whoop. Yep. And this is just an example. There's lots of them out there, but different ways people choose to rotate their crops around. I just don't want to skip everything at the end, too. Okay, yep. So among other things, yeah, this guy doesn't apply to you guys too much typically as vegetable farmers, but if you just, obviously pictures of very, very nice, rich, loose soil versus what can happen when it's poorly managed. That, as we talked about, a good runoff concern downhill. And those poor cattle. Let's see. Yeah, we've talked about cover crops. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but okay, here's the manure and compost. So there are pretty specific regulations on compost. You can buy prepared compost as well. Actually, Ann Fenley had a great question, which is sustain earlier. That's an odd one, OMRI listed. It's a manure product, but it's considered, and you can see on an OMRI certificate, which I should figure out how to pull that up. I'm going to come back to that because I don't know if I know how to do that from here. They'll say, they'll say whether it's a compost or a manure, and that's something we'll also, if you give us a list of what you want to apply, we'll go through and look at restrictions. Is this a manure product? Is this a compost product? There's lots of things made from manure commercially that are composted. Cow's moo is a common one around here. Sustain.
So you're saying if it's compost, the dates to apply?
Yes, if the company has, especially most of these, Cosmo, I think, it's been a little while since I looked. Sustain is OMRI listed as a comp, it's considered, it's not listed as a manure, it'll specify, yeah, if it's a manure or if you can apply it without the restrictions ahead of time. And we did the 90, sorry if I'm getting in front of it, 90 and 120 days. Just remember, in general, vegetables, you're 120 pretty much. That's the easy way thing to remember. There are ways around it, but you also have to document your manure use if you're going to use manure. That's a big one if it's raw, is you have to be able to, so on your field history, we'll come to field records, you have to record, this is based on records too, you have to say, you know, I actually applied this manure in March, and I'm not going to harvest until September, whatever date. But you do have to, keep records of what you apply. And manure is when we do look for specific dates on. Let's see. So I believe you guys have gone through some seed stuff already, so I won't spend too much time on this. I did bring a form, you guys, if you'd like a copy. I hope I have it now. If not, I should point you to where this is, or we can somehow get, a link to give the Lord to give out. This is the farm. I was doing another workshop recently that I found. I haven't seen this actually. And in the vegetable world, it's probably the most important place for this, and we have not put a lot of emphasis on this, but this is, especially getting started, a good thing to do is lots of vegetable farmers save their own seeds. Right? Wonderful practice. We're supportive of this. Technically, though we have not been very particular about this over the years, we've talked about the farmers, we haven't made sure people wrote down when they harvested and how much they got, but you should be doing that, so it's a good thing to start. This shows you when we come, to say, well, where do those peas come from? You don't have a receipt, you don't have any, so I kept a record of when I harvested them. So, just a sample.
This is for if you save your own seeds or just in general?
Save your own seeds, or you create your own planting stock too. Oh gosh, look, there's this mint is going everywhere, and I want to make it bigger. I'm going to start, chopping it up and making little plantings out of it. Because some things you can divide yourself, or strawberries, or different things that you could do your own planting stock from. So seeds, basic regulations are used. You must, did I even go past that? You must use organically grown seeds unless the variety you want is not available. So what does that mean? It's quality, it's commercial availability. That's defined as form, quality, or quantity. So if you want a carrot that has certain keeping qualities, or you've grown this carrot before and you've grown lots of other carrots before, and this one has by far the best flavor, and you go and you say, gosh, you have to check at least 3 locations and go to them and say, these are the quality, this is the variety I want. Do you have anything with these, either this variety or something with these same qualities available? And you can do that by catalogs, by internet search, by calling people, lots of different ways to do it, but you have to document that you checked with them and what they had available. And we expect at least 3 reasonable locations, places that have organic seeds, have organic vegetable seeds. There's lots of resources out there. There's some good searches online. I mean, if you put into Google, find organic carrot seed, that's a good way. There's lots of ways to do it, but you do have to document it. Yes, Finley.
Okay, here's one issue that I have this year, and it's related to seed. So I like to order the green bean jade 1, but this year I ordered them. I had the back order 3 times. Finally, sent a letter saying that we have a disease problem with our jade 1, so we are no longer to provide you with the beans. So there's still the one that's not organic, it's still running around. Is it okay for me to purchase that or no?
Yes, as long as you, so you ordered from a place that had organic, and they were out.
I know.
Yep. Yep, they were out, you went to 2 other places, those are good places. Yep, yeah, that's reasonable, definitely. As long as you keep that document that show that you did it. Seed search form, I think, is the next one. You can use that type of a form. You can keep the catalogs, but you have to keep them. And you have to keep your records for 5 years. Well, if you're using the catalog as your record to show, I checked in high mowing, look, they don't have J beans in here. They don't even sell them, for example. Or if they do, then you could get a little email or a little back order note that shows that you tried.
They do, but they said they're out of stock, so that's the issue. So I can still purchase from like Jordan, the JC that they have.
As long as you check the other places and you kept the documentation, and from Jordan's you get your, you can show that it was J beans and that they were not treated. Jordan's is a famous one around here. Not a good place to search for organic seeds because they don't tend to have organic. You can use them if you've checked other places. One of the reasons for an exemption from using organic seed is not price. Unfortunately, that's a hard one, I know, for some folks. But you can't say, it was 3 times more as organic. Like you can't allow that as an exemption. You still have to use the organic. But especially if you're going to Jordan's, for example, make sure you get your receipt. Make sure you can read the receipt. They don't always have the best handwriting. Make sure it says the variety before, and I would say do this before you leave. Make sure you get a bag or tag that shows that the seed is not treated and what the variety is. Because sometimes things are handwritten there. You can take pictures of what you got. But in order for us to be able to say, we know this green bean was not treated, how do we do that? We have to have some kind of a record. If we get an invoice from somewhere like Jordan's that simply says J beans, they often don't write whether the seed is treated or not on the invoice. So that's one I'll tell you as an inspector. The first one I'm going to look at is Jordan. Because they have a lot of treated seeds and they don't write it down well. I'm not saying don't buy there, just be cautious. Whereas high mowing, we know you're not going to get non-organic treated seed. Everything's organic. A little easier to document. You don't have to buy from high mowing. You're not required to buy from any specific place. There's there's tons of sources out there. Even Menards is carrying organic seeds now. There's lots of sources, but you have to keep the documentation. And we generally say invoice and at least a tag per lot or variety, or packet. Keep your packets, even once they're empty. At a place like high mowing, we're not as particular about that because we know you're going to have gotten organic seeds from there. But if there's a potential it was non-organic, GMO, untreated, that a place sells that, the tag or the packet shows what you actually got. There can be back order after back order after back order, right? This gets kind of painful sometimes for people who order a lot of seeds, but yeah. Yes, go ahead. Somebody else had a question.
For example, connecting to his question, if we buy seed from Gordon, but we ask them, is the seed treated or untreated? If they say it's not treated, can we just ask them to, do we have to ask them to initial or just writing down on the label it's not treated, or is there going to be a way to show you that it's not treated?
It'd be nice if you got them to write on there untreated. I would still, from my experience with them, ask for the packet to be certain. In my experience, they have not been great with their invoices, and I just bring that up because a lot of people go there, and that's okay. But there it is. Almost always, but not always, prohibited seed treatments are bright colors. Anytime you're getting a brightly colored seed, stop. Stop, make sure you know what it is. That's 3 years right there. Treated seeds are a definite 3 years. Those are fungicides, Those are strong chemicals, and they are, among other things, sometimes contain the ones we know are killing the bees now too.
So my question is, do we have to making sure that it's not treated? Because in the past, I used to ask them like, I was wondering if the seed is organic or not. Then they'll say, oh, the seed is not treated, or oh, the seed is treated, or the seed. They're gonna ask me, do you want organic or not organic, like that. So if they say it's not treated, then it's okay to buy it.
If you've done your seed search, right, you've searched for organic seeds elsewhere at least 3 good places, then yes, if you're at your place that does not have organic seeds, and you're sure it's not treated, as a farmer, you want to protect yourself for, think of this from your own, like, I don't want to risk this, but you want to get, ideally they'd write something down, and also, if it's something like a bag that doesn't have a lot of information on it, if you can, take a picture of it. That's one way to do it. Sometimes what people will do is save that bag with maybe just a couple seeds in it too, as a way to show here are these beans. There's a few left, and you can see at least that there's no bright colored treatment on there. There are some allowed treatments. I haven't seen those coming out of Jordan much at all. There's some allowed pelleting treatments. There's allowed inoculants. There's not allowed inoculants. Sometimes, inoculants are what go on legume crops, on beans and peas, clovers, alfalfas, those types of things, in order to increase microbial activity at the root zone. There's quite a few that are allowed. You do need to know and tell us if you're using those. There are some that are GMO. 3 years.
If I buy blue corn from, would that be treated? Blue corn or black corn?
If it's a real genuine blue corn, no, probably not. Yeah, there's really, there is pretty colored seed out there that's real. Yeah, good question. Yeah, no, blue corn is great. If you have saved your own seed in the past and now you're certifying, save a little bit, show us what it was, take pictures.
But you have to, from the beginning though, you have to ask, okay, even, I have seeds that I've been saving for, say, 3 years,
Yeah.
Now, and I'm using this, you will still ask me the source of the original seed?
No.
3 years?
Depends on what it is. Typically, no. In vegetables, there's not a lot of GMO potential, is the good news. Typically, if you've been saving a vegetable seed for years and years and years, we will not require, this is our policy, I can't speak for all certifiers on that, we will not typically require you to do a seed search for that because you've been selecting that and saving it. You're not going to be able to go and buy that exact same thing on the market. That's distinct at this point. Just like garlic is one that's very common that people will save for years and years. And if you come to us the first year, we won't make you go buy organic garlic somewhere else. We'll make you continue, if you buy more, you have to buy organic down the road. But you can save your own because we understand that it adapts to your place.
Well, and then it just follows up then. So if you have any seeds and you do that, then it's okay. Would you want, when you have your seed, then would you want us to save a little bit of it?
If you're going to prove
for something, like you would say.
we need to have some kind of a record of where it came from and that it wasn't treated at the very least. One way to do it is to have just a little bit of an example left. That's a very good way. You could start keeping a little log now of what you're saving. We'll take your statements, your logs, if you keep seeds. Yep. Who else? Somebody else had a question. Okay, we'll come back. Seeds take a lot of time in vegetables often. That's one of the timelier parts of vegetables because you guys tend to use so many, which is great. Diversity is good, right? But it is a timely process. So again, keep your invoices. Keep your invoices. Oh, Jordan's, there's a fine example of when we got in. That was a while ago, but 10 pounds of black turtle. Does it say untreated? Nope. Does it say treated? Nope. We have no idea. It's a common one. Pinto beans, untreated, no idea.
So the other thing you get from Jordan, just buy materials from Jordan. Because it looks like they have bad reputation when it comes to seeds.
And I don't want to put them down. I'm not putting them down. I'm just letting you know to be cautious. And you do have to go organic. Use organic seeds if they're available.
Well, 7% ahead is not.
And I bring them up because they are commonly used right in this area. I don't want to sound like Jordan's is terrible. They're not. They have good supplies, right? And it's a nice local source.
But they're challenging for organic.
Yeah, just an FYI. If you're going to use them, be aware. Oh, yep.
Up there in the corner, it has like untreated only check.
It does. Yeah. In their case, in my experience, anybody who carries treated seed, I always, as an inspector and typically as a certifier, we still always require a little more just to verify. These, at least it's nice that Jordan's is one you pick up, so you're not going to get sent the wrong thing. Once in a while, from some places, from somebody who carries organic, non-organic, treated, non-treated, you'll get sent treated seed in the mail, even if you ordered untreated. Sometimes that mistakes are made. So check your seed packets.
So if you're ordering from Jordan and you go pick it up and they mark it untreated up at the top, you can ask them, can you put additional information behind Pinto or anything else that is untreated?
You could. They did check it there. I just say, just keep the packet that it comes in still. And on seed packets, Jordan's does the plastic bags a lot, but on seed packets, often, but not always, the place to look is down in here for is the seed treated. Sometimes it's on the back side. And it will also list, these aren't great pictures, it'll also list the year, the germination year is always down there, right? So we look at it, and if you were asking for your seed receipts and your tags, this is a good clue for you of when you bought it and which one does it match up with, and for us too, when we say, but I'm looking for this other seed and it was from, it's supposed to be from 2018, but this says 2015. You say, oh yeah, I bought more, right? You'll see, inspectors will always be flipping over seed packets.
If you have seed, like green beans that you got last year that were untreated but not organic because the green beans were available organically, are you allowed to use them the following year?
We allowed, I can't always speak for other certifiers because there's nothing written in stone that says that exactly. What we tend to look at in that kind of a case is, you're not always going to buy the exact right amount of seed that you use every year, and often vegetable farmers carry their seed forward, which is a fine practice. If you're buying lots of non-organic seed, we'll be a little more skeptical of, you need to make a good attempt to be buying organic seed as well. The point being that it has happened very seldomly to my experience, but there's an occasional example of someone who says, look, it wasn't available this year, so I bought lots on purpose because I knew I wouldn't have to buy the organic then for a couple years, right? Vegetable seeds, some of, beans are a bad example because they don't carry forward so well. They don't tend to last. The germination drops fairly quickly, but some things last a long time. So in general, we're looking for a reasonable effort, a good effort. And general improvement, continuous improvement. Well, I got, 75% organic seeds this year, and so I'm trying a couple more varieties this year to see, to compare. I bought this non-organic one last year. Maybe I'm going to buy a little bit of organic this year to grow next door and see, is this variety that's non-organic and still non-organic? Do I still need that and want that for the market I've got? I had one more point there and I'm forgetting it, but every seed searches every year. That was the other thing too. So even though a variety's not available this year, next year you get to go check again. The point of the exemption is to create more organic seed on the market. It's the understanding that it's not completely available, every variety isn't out there, but if we don't require it, it's never going to happen. And as an organic farmer, you want people to buy your organic, you go to the trouble of certifying, you want people to buy your products. The seed industry needs that too, and without the organic farmers buying organic seed, we're not going to get varieties that are developed for organic farms. That, otherwise these varieties are grown on conventional fields in conventional conditions without pressure of weeds, different pests, different diseases. They're not as well adapted. So that's part of the reason. Just an example of, just make sure your records are readable too. Once in a while we get things like this that it takes us, just when you get your receipts, your invoices, if you make copies, it's just a point that there may be enough there that we can get something and call them and say, can we get a copy of this? But it's not uncommon that we run across records like that. Seed records, you can do your own record-keeping system, I think. I'm probably going on seeds a little bit here, and you guys have done this, so I'm going to jump ahead to planting stock. So annual seedlings, that's the other big one. Those have to be organic. Pretty much no exemptions. Assume there's really no exemptions on that. You do have to buy organic, raise them your own, buy from a certified organic farm for your annual seedlings. Planting stock has a different regulation on it. You have to search for organic again, and then you're allowed to have an exemption to buy non-organic if it's not available. Laura?
Can you say what planting stock is?
Yes. So seeds, right? We know what seeds are. Annual seedlings are things that are grown for this year. You get seedlings that are raised, cute little broccoli plants, onions, tomatoes. You plant those this year, they die. Planting stock is more for perennials, asparagus, often around here strawberries, raspberries, berries are that way. We consider that planting stock. Typically those things don't produce a crop the first year that you're going to be able to sell, and that's part of the reason for the exemption.
Wendy, would potatoes considered as a stock?
Seed.
A seed or stock?
Seed. Yep, so subject to organic availability.
You still have to go through the seed process of growing the plants.
Yes, yeah. And organic potatoes are fairly available. There's, a lot of the big companies have them. There's, was it Vermont? I forget their name now, but there's one in Wisconsin. Vermont Valley grows some locally, so locally adapted, which is nice. You can support a local farm. Vermont Valley. Again, you don't have to go there, as long as you make a good search. We can't tell you have to buy seeds anywhere in particular, and there's lots of places out there. If you do buy seedlings, same thing with tags, like on a seed packet. If you can, and they have these, keep an example of this. Not all of them are going to have a tag like that, and that's okay. If you're buying them from a certified organic farmer, you get their certificate that shows they're certified to raise seedlings, and then you get an invoice showing that they wrote down you bought, 36 flats of organic broccoli or whatever it is, and we'll take that as the record. They're just an example of a receipt that actually did say organic on it. Let's see, inputs. So we've touched on this a little bit, but inputs or materials are anything from seed treatments allowed. There's lots of allowed ones. Inoculants, fertilizers, compost, manure. We do have you put, if it's off-farm manure, on a list. There are some things we look for there. Mulches, pest control, weed control, disease control, any kind of sanitizers in a packing shed type area. You wash out your harvest buckets with something, maybe a peroxide or a bleach. that goes on your list, we approve that too. Really anything you use gets listed and approved. Tubers for flowers. That is a good question. I think there'd probably be some variation as to whether or not they're a rhizome or I'd have to look into that. Honestly, we really don't have any growing that, but I could definitely look into that if there's one you're specifically interested in. I think, yeah, I'd have to look into that one. There's so many different varieties of tulips versus begonias versus, yeah, and we don't have anyone who's done that on a commercial scale, honestly. Oh, there's OMRI. Okay, so omri.org. You don't have to buy something that's on that list. It's a nice resource. One thing they do have, if you're curious some night, you're wondering about different things you might use, so they have this great search bar on their website. You can both put in product names and you can put in generic items, like, can I use copper? And it'll give you a whole series of descriptions of what kind of copper, what can you use copper for, is it disease control or fertility? It's a nice resource. We use it, honestly, a lot in the office too. There's other lists out there as well. I must have an organic standards ones, but yeah, inputs, so ways to document them too, again, taking pictures of the bag, a catalog, posting, be very specific with your names, make sure you get the complete product name, like Sustain is a good example, there's 464, 842, there's all kinds of other ones in there, then they have a bunch that are not allowed too. They do make products that are not allowed, so that's why we are pretty specific on exactly which one are you using. There might be another bone meal, so there's an OMRI certificate on that one, or an OMRI seal. There might be another bone meal, for example, that's 213.1. I mean, probably not, but that's just, the names vary a lot. Same with these types of products, the pest control products they can be very closely named, and that's why we get particular, because sometimes one is allowed and the next one's not. It might be, this isn't the best example, but it might be Monterey Garden insect spray. The next one might be Monterey Garden insect spray 3, and that one's not allowed. And it changes every year. We spend a lot of time in the office on which one is this and is it allowed, and just to make sure. So just be aware that you need to be very specific. And it's because we have to be very specific. Let's see. 206, crop pest, weed, and disease management. So this is just basically saying you have to use practices to prevent these problems. It's not that you won't have them, but you have to have prevention. It's got off a little bit, but practices like crop rotation, that's of course very important. Soil building and soil and crop nutrient practices. You have to have, another step is sanitation measures to remove issues. I mean, maybe you have a disease and your practice is to remove those plants. Maybe you have some kind of pests and you handpick them. Oh, am I running out of time? Okay. Sorry, I'm not doing great on my timing tonight, but so you're describing that in your OSP. The organic regulations go on a tiered structure, so you have to use prevention practices. You should use sanitation practices. If you want to use a spray of some sort, you have to have done those other things first. And so that's also why we might approve something on one farm and not on another. Well, you need to improve the crop rotation and the soil practices before we're going to say, yep, you can use that. Not super common, but it's out there. So we're going to jump through these a little bit because different ways to control weeds, just so we can get to a little bit more.
If you come up for certification and someone hasn't done something like give time for remedy, but remedy this and then pull it back out?
Yeah, it depends on what it is. But yeah, I mean,
It's not an egregious thing, because this is not great.
yeah, often, yeah, you might get a lot of reminders are out there in certification where next year, okay, what's an example? You, drawing a blank. Yeah, there are a number of things that are not, you didn't use a pesticide, exactly. You didn't use a treated seed. There's no contamination or integrity issue. It's organic, but there's some kind of a documentation of record keeping or, okay, wait a minute, that one field was broccoli last year and it's broccoli again this year. What happened to your crop rotation? But you did a good job everywhere else. We'll say just make sure you attend to that. Yep. Yeah, there's kind of points for improvement. We didn't get too far into record keeping, but so basics of record keeping, again, regulation, you're keeping track in your records of everything you do in the field, what your seeds are, so we talked about that, where your seedlings or plants came from, your field work. So this is a log. You keep showing that I'm using these practices. I prepared the soil, maybe I did I tilled it twice, I let the weeds flush up, and I worked it again to get the first flush out. So you write down, I came back out and did that again. In vegetables, we're a little more flexible on how much you write down, but you have to have your inputs. You have to have your planting dates. You have to have your harvest or sales dates. In vegetables, they're a little bit, sometimes they're often the same, right? You're harvesting often the day before or the day of. So if you have good sales records, we'll take those as a harvest record. You have to keep track of your sales. How much did you actually sell? Our job is to look and say, this farm here says they sold, $10,000 worth of product. Is that reasonable for an organic system? Or does it seem like there's a chance that something happened here that shouldn't have? What are we looking for? Our job is to say, is this a reasonable production amount? So that people aren't mixing non-organic things or using, fast-growing fertilizers or what have you. But that's why we ask for the records. And our world has gone to record keeping, but rotation. So you'll get, most of you are getting these lovely fields that had cover crops last year. We'll ask you to go through and write down what crops are you growing and where. And in a vegetable situation, often that's by bed. If you're on a bigger scale, it might be a whole field. But often it's maybe this bed halfway here is sweet corn, and then this half was tomatoes. That you're keeping track somehow, and the reason for this is how else would we track the rotation? Both what are you growing, and so that next year, say we come back again and say, okay, this bed said it was beans all through here last year. We have that record. You have that record, and this year, and then maybe then it went to a cover crop, and then you say planted beets, into a different family. Into some kind of a rotation. And let's see, yep, so log, this is just an example, ways to do it. You can put down when you planted on your bed map. That's a nice way to do it. You could write your inputs on there if you had room and a date. People do this in all different kinds of ways. We can't tell you how to keep your records. We simply have to tell you must keep them. And they must be, enough to show a trail of how much did you plant, what happened through the season, and how much did you sell. That's kind of the very basics of what we're after. There's lots of different records that we provide that are out there, even on the Federal National Organic Program site, that help you with this. You don't have to use these, but it's one way. This is not a great, this is an okay vegetable one. There's different ways to do it. It's kind of how everybody's brain works a little differently on what makes sense to them on how to keep records. You can do this on a calendar. You can...
Do you have forms you can download?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we have quite a few on our website. Yep. Honestly, if, just see what works for you. You're not required to use, say, if you certify with us, our forms. You could go to some other certifier's site and use theirs. That's fine too, as long as it shows, you find a different format you like. Oh, you're using that one, let me try that, Greenhouses, you get to keep records if you're growing seedlings. Seeding date, number of flats, plant count per flat. Do you need, how many plants do you get? How many plants do you plant in the field? Where do those go?
So you certify by, you certify land. What if you're growing things like in a greenhouse and in that certified?
Yep. Yeah. At this point, yes. There's been some debate on that, but yes. I mean, you can definitely, yes, seedlings.
Raised bed in a greenhouse.
Yep. Raised beds in greenhouse. Container plantings can be certified. Yeah, absolutely. You can do stuff in pots even. I guess I haven't seen much of it. There's been a little bit, but yeah. Field activity records, as we were sort of talking about what they're called, so tracking planting through harvest and the things you do along the way. Just examples, you can do it in a calendar, in a journal, with pictures, on a form. Just find something, this is a good year to practice it. Those of you that are at MFA, those of you that have been there have gotten to practice it. We'll ask you there's a description in your organic system plan that you write that says, I'm keeping field records. You check boxes basically, but you're keeping field maps, you're keeping input records, you're keeping harvest records, you're keeping sales records. Generally, all of those things are required. There's some more in there that are, a little bit more optional, but let's see. Production and planting record. I'm going to jump ahead to one that I think is, so sales. As vegetable growers, one of the more challenging things is keeping track of what you sell, especially if you're going to a farmer's market, right? Because people are coming and going and flying out, and you can't write down every time you sell a tomato. That's okay. Yes?
I have questions quickly before regarding the seed saving. Can we save any kind of seed that we can save, or only the seed that they don't have for sale?
You can, if I understand, you can save any, like if you're on your farm, you can save any seed that you grow as long as it's not protected by a federal seed law, which you're probably not going to have in vegetables because those are not going to, those are hybrids that are not going to come back true to form anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like, we can save any seed that we know that we can save.
I think so.
Or only the seed that they don't have for sale.
No.
Oh, are you asking if high mowing has this seed available as organic? Is that what you're asking? Do you have to buy
For
that?
example, like brown sugar, we know that we can save the seed, but they do have for sale too.
I'm sorry,
So,
hear the first thing you said. For example, what was the,
did you say no?
what was the for example?
For example, like brown sugar.
Ground cherry. Okay.
Yeah, we can save too, but they do have sell too.
Oh, if you save it yourself, save it yourself is great.
So we can still save and growing, and we don't have to buy it.
No, if you save it, you can save your own seeds. And again, I can't speak for every certifier. I think most of the ones who operate in this area go with the same Laura said something.
My only thing is that, are you talking about the seed that you saved last year? Or something that you would grow at regular farms?
Yeah.
Because before, obviously, it would be different if you were growing somewhere that wasn't certified organic, and then you save the seed, and then you get certified organic. And next year, would you have to do a seed search then? Or is it kind of a gray area? I feel like it was kind of a gray area when I got Susan, but you can.
Which is fair. There's nothing in the standards that exactly
My
says
question
this.
is general. It's in general.
If you're organic, okay, so not the specific certification,
It's
okay.
in general, like, there's some seed that you can save in a plant.
Oh,
It's
not
not
just organic. Oh, yeah, there's federal seed laws that for protected varieties, F1 hybrids are protected seeds. And you can't, there are federal laws that are beyond organic that are different, that don't allow some seeds to be. You can save them for your own use, but you can't sell them. I guess maybe that's a better answer. For your own use, you can save them.
So we need more information on that to be clear. In care, we don't save it, we don't see, and then.
Yeah, it's unusual in vegetables, I would say, to have something like that. That happens more often in field crops, big, corn, beans, soybeans, oats.
But you're not going to be growing a hybrid unless you want an organic farm.
Well, you could be growing a hybrid, definitely. Yeah, there's lots of F1 hybrids in organic, even some that are certified organic. But those, if you save them because of the hybridization process, they're not going to grow to be the same thing next year. You've got to save something that's stabilized, essentially. So if you're growing it for your own use, I don't know all seed laws. We could answer that at MCIA, other people could, but there are, typically if you're using it for your own use, you're okay to save it. You cannot sell it, though, as a seed. And you can't sell seed, honestly, you can't sell seed that you produce anyway without following seed laws.
There's a list in the crop tab. There's other list that farmer cannot save and grow for stock.
There are some of those, yeah. Yeah, no, there definitely are. So,
Can we get one of those lists? Because I want to know this.
I think the catalog from Johnny, and you see that they can reproduce, that they were recorded underneath the description.
Yeah.
Then there was a, you can repeat. So,
Yeah, I don't know that there's a list because this changes every year. What's available, what's on that list, and things come off after a certain amount of time, or the patents are off in 10, I don't know how many years. Yeah, but yeah, check catalogs. Typically though, if you save it for yourself, but there are some that aren't. So this is just an example of an option for a farmer's record. You track what the crop is you took, how much of it you took to the market, and how much you ended up with at the end. And then how many total dollars did you make? As long as that's reasonable at a farmer's market, we'll take that. You don't have to, that's a common one. How the heck do I track that, she bought a bunch of broccoli and a bunch of kale and 3 onions from me? You can, as long as you're making your records reasonable, we would call that type of a record reasonable. You track your total sales for the day, how much you brought, how much you sold. Does that balance out reasonably? You don't know, sometimes somebody doesn't give you the full amount of money, or you get extra, or you gave them a little bit extra because they wanted to try something. It's not perfect at a farmer's market. So that was an example. Just one more reminder. Again, we talked a little bit at the beginning, but any labels at all that you use on a farm, as a certified organic farm, we have to review all those and approve them for use. This symbol, they're very particular about it being the right color and the right size and all those good things. So we have to that's why we approve it and make sure, because it's amazing how many ways people can change that. It's amazing how creative people are. Are we at the end of the time? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.